Thanks for killing time with me, CC Cowie Z. All right, I want to thank my subscribers. I want to thank anybody who's tuning back in. On the roads, every time you ride, the road surface constantly changes, whether it's railroad tracks, bridges, potholes, dirt, moving road hazards like pedestrians and vehicles, wildlife. You have to keep on your toes. You have to stay focused. You have to use the skill set that you got every single time you ride. Road surface change. You know, here I am leaving my easement, soft, and all of a sudden you get this log that wasn't there last time. Over some railroad tracks that I'm obviously leaning over and shifting gears and accelerating over. You can't predict any of the road surface hazards you're going to face unless you're in a controlled environment like a track day or training course. All right, here we are, some more railroad tracks. I slowed this down a little bit. See how I'm going straight, but the railroad tracks are angled. Those aren't too bad. They're just some of the ones that I cross frequently. This is the same set of railroad tracks, it's just a different intersection and I'm headed the other direction. And notice how they clean this up, but it's still really slippery when it rains. Sometimes it's condensation when it doesn't rain. I stopped really far back here because the people turning left like to cut over too sharp and into my lane sometimes. And I don't know whose wise idea this was to put this faux brick crosswalk, but you know, like 20 years ago they put it in my town and I almost high-sided my ZX7 Ninja. It was a dry day too. Here's that same set of railroad tracks that we had where we're leaning the bike, so we're going to be at a lean angle. I slowed it down a little bit here. It's a different day. And I do something a little bit different here. Sometimes I lean forward, and that's what I do here. I lean forward over the tank a little bit and hit it at a lean and accelerating at the same time, sometimes switching gears. Like right where I need to switch from first to second gear a lot of the time if I'm not rolling from there. Here's more of that fake brick crosswalk. And notice how I'm not counter steering. That was a 15, 20 mile an hour turn, no counter steer. Here I slowed this down a lot. This is a point and shoot from a stop, a dead stop, using your rear brake pedal. I know where the mess is. This is just awful. Now they've cleaned this up. For years it was like this though, but they've repaved it. But look how terrible the road surface is. Big dip while you're turning your bars. I don't like to get out too wide next to that concrete curb because it's just better after having some experience going across that. Now here's some more I know how to navigate through, so I don't mind accelerating. I'm also on the Z900 RS Cafe and it's got that traction control mode 1. So I'm not worried about hitting the accelerator hard. But can you imagine coming through there and you've never been there before on a motorcycle? All right, here's a traffic circle. I avoid them at all costs. Sometimes I have to use them. Look at all of the reflective paint for the crosswalk here. It can be very slippery. And yeah, that car stops, but you have your fingers over the brake lever just in case. More reflective paint. Now I use this ride because here you can see different pavement patches. They're darker, they start right there. There's gonna be another one, and then there's one right in the middle of this intersection that I always get up out of the seat. I don't pull myself up on my bars, I just use my legs, get my butt out of the seat a little bit so I'm not bottoming out. And notice these medians in here. If you're not from around here and you try to navigate through, they're going too fast or at night and you hit that concrete median, and then there's a nice big patch of pavement, more crosswalk, reflective paint, can be very slippery, doesn't have to be raining. And notice the tree canopy. A lot of times long after the rain's gone, the tree canopy underneath it, the road is still slick. And sometimes that creates a treacherous riding surface that you'll see later on in the video. Another place I like to ride that just has some really awful potholes and bad patching. Now here we go. I want to talk about, not counter steering. Here I am doing 10, 15 miles an hour when I accelerate. No counter steer. I'm putting all the turn onto the front tire. I trust this bike. I trust my ability to turn motorcycles, handlebars. I don't have to counter steer. I grew up taught 25 years of riding now, but I grew up taught you don't have to counter steer unless you're doing like over 30 miles an hour or something like that. Even then, it's debatable. Look, I'm not counter steering here. It's just not that type of road. I don't have to counter steer unless I'm doing speeds, highway speeds, higher speed turns. Now here we have a tabletop crosswalk. Now tabletop is just a flat top speed hump. Now look how many surface changes you've got. Old pavement, new pavement, concrete, new pavement, old pavement. Look how long this stretch of patch pavement hiding the manhole covers. Now, this is something you're just gonna have to get used to as a rider. The more you do it, the easier it's gonna get. You're not even gonna really have to think about it the more you do it. Here's a surface change, and more of that fake brick crosswalk inlay. It's got granules in it that's supposed to keep it from slipping, but it is very slippery. Now here's an example of what I was talking about, where the tree canopy is beautiful, but everywhere there's tree canopy, there is just awful pitted roads, huge potholes, bad patches where they cover it, but they just don't do a very good job covering it. It is, I feel like, might be a little bit of a deterrent for people speeding down this road who aren't familiar with this place. This is a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit here, and for good reason. But even at 35 miles an hour, if you're not paying attention, you take one hand off the bar, or you're looking at something and you hit one of these potholes, even at 35, 40 miles an hour, you go down, it's not going to be a good day. So everywhere I see tree canopy, I anticipate either moisture or bad potted roads like this, pothole roads like this, pitted roads and just torn up. The roots come up underneath the road sometimes too, but this is mainly from standing water. Just awful roads. You gotta be aware. Now here's something that is different. This is a moving road surface hazard. Wildlife. Now I have my fingers over the brake lever on the front and gentle squeeze. You gotta almost be able to come to a complete stop without putting your feet down sometimes. That is what shows a good rider who's in control. That's why they do your safety course tests at slow speeds. Fast motorcycle riding in a straight line is not hard at all. Riding your motorcycle slow, parking lot speeds, turning left and right, making U-turns just like this, that's what shows you a good rider who's in control. Now look at this stick over here. I pass it on the way in, I pass it in my first loop, and now I want to hit it deliberately while I got the bike lean. Watch the handlebars if you can see them here, boom. My right hand gets kicked back towards me. Now here's a road surface change that we should all be familiar with, and that is from pavement to concrete. I slowed this down as a bridge. There's a lip right there, and you hit it pretty hard. Now, if your suspension rebounds and you're not expecting it, and your knees are not wrapped around the tank, and you get thrown out of your seat, feet come off the pegs, not a good day. All right, so you can also see where there are lines that go across from one side of the road to the other. And then here's this big dip off. Look where so many people have bottomed out coming off of that. All right, now here's another road surface hazard that is moving, and luckily in this case, I slow it down a lot, you can see, but luckily this doesn't cross my path. I do see it. It's so well camouflaged, but it doesn't cross my path. And you're gonna see it right down here on the right outside of the white line that shows you where the road ends, down here on the ground. And yes, that is a pretty big fox squirrel. Now, just stands there and waits for me to pass like a proper squirrel. But sometimes you're not always gonna get that kind of behavior. Wildlife can be erratic, just like vehicles and people, pedestrians as well. Now here's that same set of railroad tracks just years ago before they, look how big the gaps are here. And this guy's pouring coffee out. So the road surface hazard is the most important hazard for you to observe. It's just a fact. Look at this sand trap here. Slow this one way down. This sand used to come all the way across the road. An unsuspecting rider who's maybe looking at the beautiful oak tree to your right, looking at that beautiful Spanish moss, maybe it's their first time down this road, you don't see that sand trap and you end up down there in the ditch on the right with the water. You don't want to do that. Or on going towards the left, there's street signs, there's trees. You just have to be absolutely scanning 100% all the time. Yeah, you can take your eyes off the road, but make sure it is not for very long. I get it. Sometimes you got to adjust your visor. Notice how you have to straddle all these road patches here, and pedestrian right there on a bicycle. Have respect for the neighbors. But yeah, everywhere there's tree canopy, there is some damp. It rained a while ago on this day, but it was still wet under the trees. Look at all that road surface. It's just terrible. You can tell water just sits there, patches of water everywhere. And then you get these patches of sunlight that shine through that almost look like that sand. That's the other thing we have to remember is you gotta grip the tank with our knees and not white knuckle grip the handlebars. You do not want to get into speed wobble, and you can do it at slow speeds. Now here's one wildlife encounter that is woof, very, 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 very fast. Here we got it in slow motion now. I slowed it down for you. I was doing about 60 miles an hour. And this squirrel decides to do the dance with me. Now I was prepared to just go ahead and do the most unthinkable thing, and that's run this squirrel over. I do not want to ever hit any wildlife, but I gripped the tank with my knees. I wasn't gonna hold the bar too tight, and I would use my knees as suspension. Now here's a little practice thing I like to do at home. And you can't counter steer that. You have to put the input into the handlebars. All right, thanks for killing time with me again. I hope you liked the video. Now, just to let y'all know, I'm not a coach, I'm not a teacher. I've been riding for 2.5 decades. Now, yeah, there comes times where I have bad habits, we all do. But taking your eye off the road, not scanning for road surface hazards is probably the most difficult thing to get by. Yeah, we all have to mess with our helmets occasionally, the visor. We have touch screens now on our handlebars. But just remember, taking your eyes off the road for just a second can change the whole outcome of your day. So when you're gonna come to these road surface hazards, whether it's tracks, cracks, potholes, any road surface moving hazard like animals or people, of course, cars, those are the things that you cannot control. You're not in an uncontrolled environment. You're not at a racetrack. You're not at a test facility course. You're on the road with other people, objects in the road. It's just something that's always going to be there. It's never going to change. I don't know who goes out there and rides just the most pristine roads with no traffic. I mean, sign me up. I'll move there in an instant. Anyway, thanks for killing time with me again.